You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. On July 4th, 1776, the Second Continental Congress, meeting in Philadelphia, declared the independence of the United States of America in the Declaration of Independence. We celebrate July 4th as the nation's birthday. The challenges of maintaining our freedom as a nation continue as we're constantly confronted with both external and internal forces that challenge our status as a free nation. From a personal spiritual perspective, we turn our attention to freedom as an internal affair. When Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free," I believe he was talking about an inner freedom, an inner peace that comes with knowing the truth of our connection with the infinite. On the surface, we Americans, like the Jews of Jesus' day, could argue that we've been in bondage to no other nation. How can the truth make us free when we're already free? But who of us can say we've never been enslaved to the kind of fear that knots the stomach and keeps us awake at night? To know the truth of our connection with God is to know that which is within us is greater than any appearance or limitation we could encounter in the world. The attainment of spiritual freedom requires a different level of diligence that isn't quite as obvious as the kind we employ to solve circumstantial issues. Spiritual freedom involves a shift in perception, a mindfulness of how we're using our mental faculties. We know how easy it is to let our imagination run wild when we're concerned that a situation isn't going in our favor. We've all professed faith in God when we really had our faith focused on the worst possible outcome. We know what it's like to try to stay positive, only to find ourselves buried beneath an avalanche of negative thoughts. We've used our judgment to declare ourselves incapable of handling some challenging situation. And we've experienced the pain of hanging on to failures and resentments that bind us to difficult conditions of the past. We know what it is to be enslaved to fear, self-doubt, or the belief that someone or something has the power to rob us of our peace, prosperity, and happiness. How do we declare our spiritual independence from the tyranny of our own out-of-control thought and emotion? How do we reach the place where our inner freedom is no longer diminished by challenging events and negative appearances? There are two helpful insights I'd like to share with you today. The first is understanding the difference between events and the way we experience them. We're programmed to give external appearances, events, the power to control our thoughts and feelings. Jesus' instruction to take our attention off appearances and turn it instead to the ever-expanding power of God suggests a different and better way to approach our life. The second insight involves an understanding of our capacity to know God firsthand. It's fair to say that most people believe that a firsthand experience with God is reserved for the spiritually advanced, that much more time and study is required before they can enter the ranks of the spiritually enlightened. It isn't a lack of capacity or capability that stands in our way. Our spiritual progress, or lack of it, is determined by the value we place on our ability to open this inner door to an experience with God. I'm sometimes asked how I can say on one hand that the soul is complete, and on the other hand acknowledge the challenges of the human condition. Aren't these challenges evidence of a partially evolved soul? And won't the human condition as a whole be vastly improved when we finally reach the tipping point in our evolutionary process, where the lion lays down with the lamb, and a new age marked by peace around the world finally begins? If we ask whether Jesus was a highly evolved soul, I'm sure the vast majority would agree that he was. What this same group may ignore is that the gospel accounts tell us that from the moment of his birth to his death, Jesus lived in the swirl of controversy that culminated in his crucifixion. As the designated Lamb of God, he left in his wake a string of enemies that threatened him throughout his life. Wouldn't we expect a highly evolved soul to demonstrate a peaceful and prosperous life, free of contention? What we may not consider is that our gospel accounts represent an evangelical interpretation of a series of events that, strung together like beads, present a snapshot of the life of Jesus. Virtually nothing is known of how Jesus actually experienced these events. Unlike Paul, we have no letters expressing feelings and viewpoints that would have been important to him. Considering some of his sayings, it appears that Jesus didn't equate the character of events with the quality of the internal experience. The tribulation that occurred in his external world didn't seem to be the yardstick by which he measured his own inner experience of peace. He said, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives, do I give to you." Failure to discern the difference between events and experience is, I believe, a significant contributor to the conscious disconnect we have with our own spiritual wholeness. Our yardstick for spiritual success is tied to externals. We're like a person with a telescope pointed to the ground and asking, "Where are the stars?" Focused on the ever-changing world of events, we ask, "Where is my peace? Where is my spiritual enlightenment?" Many of us accept the truth that we have a spiritual body that maintains its wholeness, even when the physical body displays episodes of illness. One healing technique is to mentally and emotionally lay hold of this spiritual body and see it manifesting through our physical body. In the best way we know, we take our attention away from the event of physical illness and place it on the wholeness of the spiritual body until we experience this wholeness shining forth through the physical. We may be distracted by pain and other significant inconveniences, but we slowly move the telescope of our attention from this terrestrial event of physical pain and limitation to the heavenly experience of the vast universe of our spiritual wholeness. Spiritual teachers of all time have warned against determining the truth by looking to appearances and events. To look at the turmoil in one's life and determine that its presence is the result of spiritual inadequacy is a false judgment that forever keeps us locked into an event-oriented measure of spiritual progress. This is like looking out the window on a rainy day and thinking in some way you're responsible for the sun not shining. Despite the presence of clouds, the sun still shines. This event of rain has nothing to do with the behavior of the sun, and has nothing to do with the constitution of our consciousness. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. It's how we choose to experience the rain that makes the difference. If we see the clouds and the rain as effects of our inadequate understanding, then poor weather conditions will always trigger the assumption that we have some evolving to do. If, on the other hand, we know the sun shines regardless of whether or not it rains, and that we have absolutely nothing to do with how weather systems play out, then we're free of this impossible burden. Even when we can see nothing but clouds, we still know the stars haven't gone away. The event of a cloud cover does nothing to alter our conviction that the sun or the star-studded sky remains. It's the dominating belief in the power of events that keeps us from experiencing the completeness of our soul. It's often easier to believe in the advanced state of a Jesus or the advanced soul of one of our favorite authors than to believe in ourselves. We turn our attention to these people, remove them from the context of their life's events, and imagine that their superior understanding has allowed them to navigate through this life in ways of which we can only dream. Our experience may seem anything but divine. So we look to others with the hope of learning how they did it so we may do it as well. Regardless of how pristine an experience another may have had, looking to them for spiritual help is looking in the wrong direction. We've turned our telescope to the earth. Not a single spiritual teacher worth his or her salt ever said, "Turn your telescope toward me." To the contrary, all have said, "That which you are seeking is within you." Don't judge your spiritual status by the events transpiring around you. Don't compare yourself to me. Connect with your own completeness, your advocate, your comforter, your Christ. Love the Lord your God. In this way alone, you find the peace for your restless soul that longs to step forward into the full field of your vision, your understanding of yourself. Events are things that happen. Experience is the way you choose to relate to events. You don't change your experience by changing events. You change your experience by knowing the truth of your completeness. In our quest for spiritual freedom, another factor to consider is the value we place on finding our inner point of stillness. People often ask how they can get past the constant flow of thought when they're trying to be still and experience their spiritual center. Emily Cady suggested that because nature abhors a vacuum, this bombardment of thought is the result of trying not to think at all. I compare this flow of thought to a rushing river. If someone asked you to cross this river, but you could see no reason for doing it, you might wade in, feel the power of the current, and then step back out with the feeling that trying to cross it's too dangerous. It's not worth the risk. If that person pointed to a tree on the far bank and explained there was a check for $10 million with your name on it, tacked to the tree, do you think you'd find a way across? In the first scenario, you see little value in the risk or effort of crossing the river. In the second scenario, the value you place on crossing the river changes. $10 million means something. When you understand the value of crossing the river, you'll figure out how to do it, no matter how long it takes or how difficult it is. The problem most of us face with our busy mind is that we don't understand the value of what we might find at our spiritual core. We have opinions of what it means to be spiritually enlightened. We read of the ecstasy and boundless stores of wisdom tapped by those who've crossed the river. We read of great spiritual power awaiting those who make this crossing. Yet we encounter this river feel the force of its current, we conclude that it must not be our time to cross. Perhaps if we read more about it, or speak enough empowering affirmations, we'll build up the spiritual strength to take this plunge. None of this is true. Every person alive is fully equipped to cross the river of the busy mind. No soul evolution or further learning required. The only thing that has to happen is that a shift in values must occur. Each person has to grasp the true value of crossing that river, and each person must stay with this process until he or she experiences the desired breakthrough. There's always someone telling you that they can get you across. Join a special group, pay the fees, jump in their boat, and they'll take you to the other side. The reason this doesn't work is because following someone else's system doesn't require a genuine shift in values. The belief that certain people or enough money can get you to the other side changes your focus from actually crossing the river to seeking teachers and money to get you across. Your values, no longer placed in the end you seek, are now placed in the means to the end. As Emily Cady asked, is your expectation from Him, that is, your own inner guide, or is it from books or teachers, or friends or meetings, or societies? The means to the end of the spiritual breakthrough is not found in people or in new courses of spiritual instruction. It's found in you. When it came to teaching a meditative technique, Jesus was what I consider a minimalist. He pointed to the other side of the river, that is our inner sanctuary, and he said, "When you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And in praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him." I'm sure Jesus was approached by those who went into their room, shut the door, and prayed earnestly, but found they could think of nothing more than their health issue, their failing business, that annoying neighbor, the barking dog, or the task of preparing the evening meal. To these He offered this simple instruction: ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. I have to think that if he had discovered a better way, a faster way to spiritual enlightenment, he would have offered it. If it were truly possible for one human being to pass enlightenment to another, I seriously doubt he would have offered such bland instructions that obviously put the ball of enlightenment in the court of each individual. Socrates responded to a student's question about obtaining wisdom by plunging the student's head into water until he nearly drowned. Pulling him from the water, Socrates asked the student what he wanted most in that moment. Air, of course. That was the answer. Socrates explained that when the student wanted wisdom, as much as he wanted air, he would obtain it. A shift of values was the only requirement. The spiritual path doesn't require an abandonment of material pursuits. If anything is abandoned, it's because, like the man who discovered the buried treasure, we joyously let go of those possessions that wrangle our attention from a first-hand experience with God. As this experience begins to emerge in our committed quiet times, The value we place on moving deeper naturally arises. We're then guided by the greater freedom we experience. We have to have enough faith to take the plunge, even if it's blind faith, the size of a grain of mustard seed. The fact is, we do have the required faith, which is why we keep showing up at this particular riverbank. As a recap for the ideas we've covered, be aware that there is a difference between the events in your life and your experience with them. Are events dictating how you think and feel? Or are you beginning to choose your own level of experience, regardless of what appearances suggest? If you find your mind fills with distracting thoughts when you try to become still, remember the words of Jesus. Ask, and it will be given you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be opened. Be patient with yourself and be patient with the process. The benefits you'll get from this practice make it worth your time and effort. You'll find yourself looking forward to these times of recharging and spiritual infilling. In part 2 of Many Shades of Freedom, we'll explore ways of understanding what we're really asking for in our times of prayer and communion with God. Are we seeking to protect a weakness, or are we expressing a strength? With this understanding, we'll examine a simple technique that can free us from the bondage of any negative appearance. Thanks for watching, and have a great 4th of July celebration.